今天晚上呢，我特别高兴能够再一次邀请到 John，来跟我们分享，他还有一些不同的策略，也就是说，当孩子们可能接受到一个不太好的一个或者不太理想的学校，那怎么办呢？实际上还是有一些补救的方式的。那这个补救方式就是在大学以后，学完1年以后的 transfer。那这个 transfer 呢，有一些 tip 是可以值得我们去参考和学习的。首先呢，这样来分享顶尖大学它是怎么来评估转学的申请的，它是什么类别的。那么在转学的申请当中，又如何来展现自己的 strength 和我们转学的意愿跟我们在本科申请的时候又有什么不同？那转学的申请文书又该怎么写？这些都是可能很多家长心目当中的一些疑问。那最后我们还会留很多很多的时间，因为每一次 John 的 session， 我们 Q&A 时间都是不够用的。我基本上只能够挑1/3的 question 来问 John，我也会给一些开麦的时间。那家长们都是很踊跃的，所以今天我们故意跟 John 呢安排，让他这个分享的时间和Q&A 的时间呢，答疑的时间稍微再多一点点，给家长们来回答一些他们心目当中一些比较想要问的问题啊，所以大家敬请期待到最后。那么现在呢，我们就非常的用热烈的掌声，或者是一个大大的微笑，虽然 behind the scene I'm not going to see you， let's welcome John Morganelli for tonight's presentation. Thank you, John, for your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sophia. Much appreciated. All right, everyone, I'm really looking forward. Oh, okay, great. I'll share my screen. Let's see here. Okay. Can you see that screen, Sophia?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for taking a bit of time out of your day, your evening to learn about transfers. As Sophia noted, I'm John Morganelli. Many of you know me already, so I won't spend too much time on the introduction. For those of you who don't know me already, just very briefly, I was the director of admissions at Cornell most recently for the College of Arts and Sciences. I did work at 2 other universities in advance of that time. I was responsible for the final decisions of all 20,000 apps to the college. Interestingly, when I was at Cornell in my second year there, the director of transfer admission was on maternity leave. And so I managed that process at Cornell. I also managed the transfer process when I was at Lehigh. And so I do have a lot of experience related to transfers specifically. And as you can see, there's a small team of counselors that supports my effort. Kind of coined them the Morganelli method counselors because there is a specific method. They're all trained under that method. And we've had great success with that method. Okay, so let's start talking about transfers. So as you can see on the slide, the first thing that's important to note is that transferring is easier than it is to get in as a freshman. That's not even a question. When you apply as a freshman, obviously every high school student who's going to college is also applying, and so you have a great deal of competition. When you apply as a transfer, the numbers are significantly smaller. On top of that, the quality of the transfer pool it fluctuates rather significantly year over year. And so as a whole, getting in as a transfer, either as a rising sophomore or as a rising junior, is easier than it is to get in as a freshman directly from high school. And so if you were thinking about transferring or you weren't sure, but you were on the fence, it's something to think about because we've had great success with transfers. I've had students who have very little chance of getting in as a freshman be successful in the transfer process. So keep that in the back of your mind. Okay, an overview. So first and foremost, what is a transfer, right? How do we define it? It's important to recognize I've had many students and parents say to me, well, I want to transfer, but I don't need to transfer my credits. I will start as a freshman at Harvard or Princeton. So I don't need to actually get the credits. That's not really an option. So transfer defined means that either you have matriculated. So that means that you've enrolled and you showed up on campus. That could be for a day, you step in class, but as soon as you matriculate, you're considered a transfer. Even if you don't matriculate, meaning I don't show up on campus, if you've earned 12 credit hours, when I say 12 credit hours, I don't mean through dual enrollment or through AP exams. I'm talking about like I went to a college or university outside, maybe while I was in high school, or maybe after high school, and I've earned 12 credit hours. Typically, if that's the case, you will also be considered a transfer. It is up to the institution that you're applying to determine whether you are a transfer or a freshman, but these are the most common ways they define transfer: matriculate or 12 credit hours. Second, why do people transfer? Well, there's a wide variety of reasons, but of course, the main reasons is, and one that actually really can move the needle, is I've changed my academic or career goals. That's a valid transfer. For example, let's just say I'm at an institution like Penn, and I decide, let's not use Penn. People don't transfer from Penn. Let's say I'm at an institution like Lehigh. Okay, I'm at Lehigh University, and I've decided that maybe initially I was interested in environmental science, but as I've done a little bit of digging in my first couple months in college, I've come to the conclusion I'm really interested in agricultural sciences. Okay, well, Lehigh doesn't have an agricultural sciences program. So that would be a great reason to transfer. And if you applied to Cornell, which of course does, that would be a very strong reason. I'm at an institution that doesn't offer this program. That would be the best version. A lot of times, it's not really that. It's really more stuff like, I don't really like the social environment, I have personal reasons, or I'm just kind of trying to trade up, get a higher ranked school, more selective school. In the end, it is important to recognize that the universities want to understand why you're transferring. And they don't want unhappy people at one school to become an unhappy person at another school. And so you do really need to be thoughtful about how you position yourself within the context of, why am I transferring? Because if you kind of seem just like a unrestful individual that's not going to be happy anywhere, that would be a problem. Okay, why do colleges accept transfers, right? Like, what's the purpose of having a transfer enrollment process? Well, it fills enrollment gaps. So as you can imagine, when students show up freshman year, there are a wide variety of reasons why students don't make it all the way through. Maybe they do make it all the way through, but they're just gone for a period of time. They go abroad. Sometimes they transfer out themselves because they don't like the school. Sometimes they fail out. Sometimes things happen with their family, mental health issues, wide variety of reasons why gaps are created in the enrollment. And transfers are used to fill those gaps. Year over year, the gaps change, right? So if more students go abroad, or if the freshman class was smaller than expected, or more students had mental health issues this year, all of those things impact the size of the transfer class. And so, transfers, as I noted on the first slide, are a lot easier and a huge opportunity, but they are somewhat unpredictable because of the variability of what happens with enrollment. Okay, when we think about transfers, are there different types of transfers? There are kind of generally two different types and then kind of one special group. Internal and external transfers. So generally, when we're talking about transfers, I think most of you who are here, I would assume, are thinking about an external transfer, meaning, I'm at Lehigh, I want to transfer to Cornell. An internal transfer is, I'm at Cornell and I'm in the College of Arts and Sciences, and I want to transfer to Cornell and I want to be in the College of Engineering. That's what we refer to as an internal transfer. External transfers generally are harder, of course. You're literally leaving the university. But internal transfers can be challenging as well, depending on what college you're trying to transfer from and to. So if you're trying to transfer into an engineering college or a business college from an arts and sciences college, that can be tricky because of course sequencing and because of the size of those colleges. So just keep in mind, there are different types of transfers, internal and external. Most of the time, we're talking about external transfers when we're leaving one school and going to another school. When we think about external transfers, the best kind of external transfer is an external transfer that falls under the university or college's articulation agreement. What's an articulation agreement? An articulation agreement is basically, let me just pull up an example of that. This is an example of a transfer agreement at Cornell. You can see here, this is with the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. And you can see that all of the New York State colleges here are noted as having an articulation agreement. What does that mean? That means that, and you can see that you can review the CAL's course policy. The articulation agreement means that faculty members from CAL's have gone through the courses that could transfer in from all those other institutions, and they've identified already how the credits transfer. And if they've already identified how the credits transfer, it makes the admissions decision a lot easier to say like, oh, well, I know exactly what's going to transfer in. And so articulation agreement schools that offer that have a huge advantage as compared to non-articulation agreement schools. You can see here, this is an articulation agreement that Lehigh University has. This is with the community college. And this one is more robust in that you can see here, it has a minimum GPA. I don't know if it might be too small, but it has a minimum GPA of 3.5. And in essence, what they're saying there is that with that articulation agreement, yes, they know what classes are going to transfer and how, but they've also identified a grade. If you can earn a 3.5, it's also almost like a guarantee that you're going to be admitted. So if you are at a community college right now, the first thing I would do would be go to my counseling team, guidance team, whatever they call it there, and ask them, do we have articulation agreements with other universities? If yes, I'd like to see them. What are the universities? And then the second question is, what does that articulation agreement entail? Is it just about classes, or is there actually an indication if you hit a certain GPA that you can almost guaranteed earn an offer? Articulation agreements definitely enhance your chances if you're applying under one of those. Now, you don't have to apply under one of those. Of course, if you apply to, if you think about Lehigh, for example, they have like 2 articulation agreements and they're just with community colleges. So lots of students apply from schools that don't have articulation agreements and do very well. Cornell with CALS, as you can see, because of the New York State connection, they have lots of articulation agreements, but arts and sciences, for example, does not have all of those articulation agreements. So just being aware that they exist is important. And then if you are aware that they exist and they happens to be connected to a school you're interested in, you really do want to look at that and make sure you really understand what the articulation agreement means and how you can apply underneath that agreement. Okay, so, let's just say for argument's sake that, we're a student and we're trying to decide where to transfer. I've already decided I want to transfer, but I don't know exactly where to transfer. My suggestion is that you start with thinking about identifying transfer-friendly schools. What do I mean by transfer-friendly schools? So you can see, let me just find it real quick. Okay, so on the screen, this is the common data set at Harvard. And I know it's a little small, but let me see if I can find the spot real quick. There it is, okay. All right, I don't know if this might be too small for you to see, but what you see on this common data set, the common data set is a document that keeps all of the college admissions statistics. And this is Harvard. And you can see right here that 1,957 people applied for transfer admission to Harvard. They admitted 16. I would say, generally speaking, that if a school has less than 50 offers, I refer to that as a fake process, right? Fake meaning, yes, it exists, right? Like obviously people do transfer in, 16 of them have, but that those 16 people are in many ways predetermined. They're athletes, they're VIP, they're people that are not typical. And so if you go to the common data set and you just press Control F and then you find transfer, you will find this data. And I would highly encourage you to check and see if the school takes more than 50 students. If they take more than 50, I would say generally that means it's a real process, that regular students that submit their applications are being reviewed and being admitted. If less than 15 or less than 50, that is, I would say it's not very real. And you can see let me just get rid of that. You can see on the screen there that to compare Harvard that has 16, Penn took 185 transfers last year, and Cornell took 798. Now, of course, they're different size institutions, but the point is that there's a robust transfer process at Cornell. There's not at Harvard. And I would say that Penn has a robust transfer process. That's more of a size thing than do they have a transfer process thing. But it is important to check these numbers before you go, because if you apply to Harvard and Stanford only, right, you might have no chance because they literally aren't taking transfers. But you throw another school on there like Columbia, you might have a very good chance because they are, in fact, taking transfers. Okay, what are the application components? So of course, you're going to submit an app that is very similar to when you apply as a freshman. Common App, Coalition App, or institutional apps are pretty typical. A personal statement. So the Common App, there used to be a transfer personal statement. That has changed now, and the Common App has provided the same freshman prompts for transfers. And so you basically have a personal statement, just like when you apply as a freshman as a transfer. Then you have supplemental essays, just like when you apply as a freshman. The supplemental essays for some schools are exactly the same as when you apply as a freshman. I think Brown, if I remember, is the same. And then some schools have completely different questions for transfers. So it's important to take a look and identify and make sure that you're not using the wrong questions. As it relates to how important the personal statement and supplemental essays are, I would say that the supplemental essays are very important because the supplemental essays often are more academically focused than the personal statement. And in transfer world, if you will, they are very academically focused because you're much closer to either declaring your major, or possibly you might be being admitted to the major right now. And so understanding exactly what you've done academically and how that fits in is important. And that shows up in these supplemental essays. You also will, of course, have to submit a college transcript. If you're applying as a rising sophomore, then it's possible that your college transcript is rather limited because you haven't been there that long. If that's the case, you want to have a good high school record, right? You want your grades and your curriculum to be pretty strong because you have not shown as much time at the collegiate level. If you are applying as a rising junior to college as a transfer, then your high school transcript will have less impact. The college transcript will have significantly more impact. You also will submit a college report, comes from your school. That's just to note that you are, in fact, in good standing. You will submit your high school transcript, as I noted. That will be an important factor, more so if you've spent less time there, less so if you spent more time there. If you're applying in March, it's sometimes, depending on when you submit your app, the deadline's March, but if you submit your app a little bit earlier and you do not have a final transcript yet from that semester, then you will need to submit your midterm report so you can get the readers can get a sense of how you're doing in your college classes at this stage. And then finally, you have your recommendation. So as you can see, I started the recommendation because I wanted to note that a lot of students say to me, and I totally understand, that it feels very awkward to say to a college faculty member who you literally just met, "Thank you so much for this class. I'd like you to write me a letter of recommendation so I can leave this university," right? It feels awkward. And I certainly understand that. I think if you are applying as a transfer and you've been at the school for less than 1 year, you may, at most institutions, they will let you submit a recommendation from someone that you've worked for or have some other significant relationship with. I tell my clients that, we should at least think about, if you're thinking about transferring, you want to build a relationship. And if we can get an academic recommendation, we try to do it. But if there's no relationship and it will be really very awkward, then there are ways to kind of circumvent that. And then the last thing you see noted on the slide is standardized test. And I have that crossed out because those are not part of transfer admission. And that's a good reason for some students that maybe they didn't get exactly what they wanted on the SAT. And maybe that held them back a little bit when they were applying. Standardized tests don't matter in this process. And so it's kind of a fresh start from that perspective. Transfer credit. So when you apply as a transfer, they will not do a credit eval right away. They wait to see if you're admitted because credit evals take time and energy. And so they wait for the offer to go out. Once the offer is made, some schools will start to do the credit evals right away. Some will literally wait to see if you actually submit a deposit. Most don't do that because most students want to know how many credits transfer before they submit a deposit. But I have seen it before where students are submitting their deposits and they still don't really know what the transfer credits will look like because it does take a while sometimes. The credit evals generally require course descriptions, definitely course descriptions. And if you are applying, if you're looking for course credit in STEM areas, most top tier schools will also require the full syllabus of the class that you've taken that from. Cornell definitely does for all STEM classes. Many top tier institutions do. It's also important to recognize that transferring credits under humanities or social sciences is generally pretty easy. Transferring credits under STEM areas is generally quite difficult. And so, early in your career, if you're thinking about transferring, you want to try to take those common classes that you're going to have to take at most institutions, your humanities and your social sciences, get those out of the way. Those will transfer easily. STEM classes, especially if STEM is your major, most of these universities, top universities, do not want to accept STEM credits in your major from another school. So keep that in the back of your mind. The timeline. So as I said, you may apply either you may apply during your first year or your second year as a transfer. Some schools only offer second year, but many of them offer first and second. Some schools also offer mid-year or spring transfers, where instead of starting in the fall, like everyone else, say in August or September, that you start in January. So again, there's a wide variety of options of when and how to transfer, and that's because the colleges and universities are trying to fill those enrollment gaps. And so having a wide variety of different ways for students to enter the school allows them to do that. At Cornell, the spring transfer, which I think they just got rid of, so some schools have it, some don't. The spring transfer group at Cornell, when I was there, I think they got rid of it last year, was a very weak group of applicants. So you're talking about, these are people who are transferring and they're doing it literally in the middle of their of the semester, right? They're not even waiting to go home for summer. So as you can imagine, there are not a lot of students that think about that to do that. And because of that, it created a very, very weak applicant pool. Now, it doesn't exist now at Cornell, I don't think. I take a look at if any of the other colleges have kept it open. But some schools still do have it. And so you got to keep that in the back of your mind, that the more unique enrollment options, like starting in the middle of the year, often provide more opportunity because less people are interested in it. Deadlines are coming up if you're thinking about transferring. Some of them are March 1st. Some of them are March 15th for the selective schools. I would say that, I have students that have started very recently, and putting together a transfer app at this stage is still possible, depending on how many schools you're trying to apply to. But it certainly is still possible. As it relates to our team, this is an off season, right? Like transfers is not a huge part of our process. I would say for me as a college consultant, I think we have more transfers than almost every other college consulting company. But generally speaking, it's still a small group as compared to freshmen. And because it's a little off cycle for us, we can be a little bit more flexible with when students start. And then once you submit your application as of March 1st or March 15th, the decisions generally start rolling in April, and they sometimes go all the way through June. Even the most selective schools will often have this kind of rolling process because they'll send out a few offers and kind of wait to see how many enrollment deposits they get back. So I know that's frustrating for some students that are sitting there waiting, or sitting there May and even into June, but it's possible that it does take that long. Okay, so if you apply as a year one transfer, so I just got to college, it's my freshman year, it's this time of year, February, and I'm going to apply as a transfer, most of the decision will really lean into your high school grades and your high school engagement. It'd be nice if you had some college engagement, right? Like you've been there for a couple months, but at that point, it's not going to be super substantive. And so, you're really trading off of what you did in high school. In many instances, that's okay, as long as your high school career was reasonably strong academically with your grades. Maybe your story wasn't that good. Maybe your essays weren't that good. That's okay, right? But if your grades were reasonably strong, then you can apply as a year one transfer and use your high school engagement as the evidence of your interest in the specific academic area. Year two transfers, if you didn't do overly well in high school, then you do want to wait. So you have more time to overcome those rough grades in high school with strong grades in college. So your college grades obviously are super important. If you spend over a year there now, your engagement there will be important. So whatever you did in high school, you're going to have to level it up and continue to make progress there. The other thing that's important to understand is that when you apply in your second year as a transfer, meaning you would be entering as a rising junior, you are entering the major at that point, right? Almost every institution, second semester of sophomore year is like the end, the last time that you can declare your major. Well, at least they hope that that's the last time you declare your major. And so as a rising junior, they are accepting you into the department. What does that mean? That means that when you submit your application, the admissions office is going to read it. And they might say yes, but they now have to send it to the actual academic department you're applying to, and they have to say yes. And this surprised me. When I was at Cornell, my first year, we, transfer process ran. My team made a bunch of decisions, and we sent them off to the departments. And I got all these emails back from the CS department, the economics department. I think those were the two that stand out in my mind. And they basically said, "Dear John, the new director, thank you for sending these applications. We did not read them. We don't have any room for any additional students in our department." So, there was not much I can do there, right? If the department says, no, we aren't taking more students in our department, all I could do in theory is admit the student and tell them you're not going to have the major you want, right? So that wouldn't be a good thing. And that, of course, students aren't interested in that. And so we rejected all of those students because the department said no. The following year, my response to that was, okay, I'm not going to waste all this time reviewing a bunch of applicants that have no chance. We're only going to admit rising sophomores in the College of Arts and Sciences. Now, I'm sure they've changed that policy because I'm not in charge anymore, but that's the way I handled it. And so there are a wide variety of ways that transfer admission is administered, but it is very important to recognize that adding the department to this review process makes it harder, no question. So if your grades in high school were good, it really is easier to apply as a rising sophomore. Because if you apply as a rising junior, now you have to have a department say yes. And sometimes they just don't want more students, especially if you are in a popular area. If you're not in a popular area, then you're probably fine. And they're looking for students. It's also important to recognize that each of these departments, as if you're in college now, you're probably aware, they have requirements, right? So for example, if I want to declare computer science at Cornell, I need to get a C or better in a calc class at Cornell. Now, so the point here is if you are applying as a rising junior, and maybe you are in fact changing your mind about what you want to do academically, it is important that you know what the major requirements are and whether you meet those requirements, because if you put down a major that you do not meet the requirements for, then that would be a guaranteed reject, right? So it's important for you to be aware that you meet the requirements. Most of the time, this is not an issue because the students aren't really changing their academic areas. Like whatever they were at Lehigh is what they were going to do at Cornell. And so they do meet those academic requirements, major requirements. And then I think the last point here is what I've already noted, which is departmental resources and space. If they don't have the resources or space, they will not admit you. Okay, financial aid for transfers. It's important to recognize that transfers are an off-cycle cohort of students, right? This is like a smaller group. They're not part of that big freshman group that has an orientation, all that type of stuff. So everything for transfers is like less. It's just less across the board. There's less merit scholarships. Are there merit scholarships? Yes, but definitely less. In the Ivy League, of course, there are no merit scholarships for freshmen either. But the schools that do have merit scholarships, like a Duke, for example, has some, very limited, but some. Those merit scholarships for transfers would be even more limited. So always expect that merit is going to be pretty limited for transfers. Need-based financial aid is usually relatively similar to what you would get for a freshman. Maybe not exactly, but usually relatively similar. The documents that you will complete are basically exactly the same as when you apply as a freshman. So the FAFSA, which is your federal application for financial aid, and the CSS profile, which is your institutional college board document for financial aid, both of those documents are required. And then finally, unlike freshman admission, where, if you're not aware, maybe not the most selective schools, but a lot of these schools, there is an opportunity to negotiate your financial aid package. I would say for transfers, that's less true. It's kind of like, here's your offer, take it or leave it. They're not really negotiating financial aid packages the way they are for freshmen. Okay, transfers versus freshmen. What's the difference? I think I've kind of hit on this a lot already, so I won't belabor the point. Transfers are clearly less competitive than applying as a freshman. The second point that I would make is, and I think this about freshmen, if those of you who already have heard my presentations know that I believe specificity matters, right? So it's not I'm interested in a broad area of academia. I'm interested in a very specific area of academia, and I have specific questions about that area of academia. That's true for freshmen. It's more true for transfers. Because they're thinking about what department to put you in, you need to be as specific as possible with subsection areas and very specific ideas about how you plan to investigate the space. Because you're in college, they have a little bit higher expectation of your depth of understanding of the academic area. I always think that gives us a huge advantage because, we know these areas very, very well, and we're able to really create a lot of intellectual depth for the students when they're applying as transfer students. What is a tough transfer? So, popular majors are super tough. Computer science, that's very difficult to transfer. Community colleges that do not have articulation agreements, those are difficult transfers because the universities don't know the curriculum. They don't really know the quality of the classes. And so if there's no agreement, those are tough. And if you need a merit scholarship, that's tough too, because it's unlikely to happen. Okay, I know this is a shorter presentation than I generally give, but transfers are a unique group of students. And I would say most of what we talk about related to freshmen, about how we build a story and how we develop the ethos of the application, all of that's still true. The only difference is it's a little bit easier as it relates to your competition, and we need more specificity within the context of the academic area the student is applying under. Thank you, everyone, for your time and energy, and I'm looking forward to taking your questions.